I'm going to just talk about him this morning a little bit, well, for the duration. Next week I'm going to talk about what's holding him at bay, which is the church, and I'll talk about the extraction of the church or the rapture or whatever which we want to define it. We'll talk about that from the scriptures next week and close this particular series. And then the following week we'll take up the 1,000-year reign, the millennial kingdom, where the Lord Jesus will come down and set up his kingdom for 1,000 years after he defeats this individual, and our part in that, and what that will look like, because there are a lot of changes go on in the millennial kingdom. So we'll deal with that in a few weeks from now, so we'll get into something new. Didn't intend for this to take as long as it did, but I hadn't said that, I didn't intend to go into Daniel like we did either. So hopefully coming out of this you'll have a better understanding of the end time events in the sense of history and empires, and not to be afraid of what's going on in the world today. There ain't nobody taking over the world today like China or Russia or something like that. It's just not going to happen. So actually this character is the next individual to do something significant in the world. So I hope you've learned a lot about Daniel and so on and so forth, and again some of the insight into the character of this individual, how intelligently smart, wise and entrepreneurial he is. So if he was around today and exposed, he would be speaking at the conference that's outside the door this morning, because they wouldn't have had a better speaker entrepreneurially than him. So again, we're going to deal with this individual this morning. So class number 25, we started to talk about, or as we are winding this down, we've been talking about the intellectual, oratory, political, business, military, lobbying, governmental and religious genius of this particular individual. You know, the Bible describes him as not a delusion, but the delusion. He's also referred to in a noun, and he's not called a lie, he's called the lie. Are you guys able to see that from there? I'm sorry, you're stuck at the edge there. That's the way it was set up. So he's called the lie, and that's his name. He's not called a lie as in a verb. He's called the lie as far as a noun is concerned. And we'll deal with that next week. So the guy is highly intelligent, able to answer dark secrets and mysteries and unearth and uncover stuff that other people would have thought, there's no answer to it. He'll have answers to stuff like that. That's how intelligent and smart this individual is. He's able to answer riddles and dark sentences, the Bible says. His oratory skills are second to none. This particular individual just has a way of making you hear what you need to hear, and everybody will be just delighted with him. He's just one of those guys who can get you in and win you with his words. He's highly skilled with his oratory skills. So skilled at it that he's even boastful. He's braggadocious in his mannerisms. He's just so intelligent and so articulate. His political genius, we talked about that last week. His ability to rise and with flattery get in among nations and kings and kingdoms. We talked about the 10 horns that came up, and out of them 10 horns, this little horn came up. He wasn't anything major, he wasn't anything substantial, he was just a little horn in comparison to the others. And yet he wangles his way in, and eventually he takes over 3 and dominates the other 7. And he does it with flattery. He does it with his oratory and his intellectual skills. And the Bible says here that, as an individual, he's just a political genius. He just is able to move among them all and please them all and satisfy them all. And they all want to be seen with him. That's the character. I want to talk quickly through these other few to exit out of this particular topic and close it off next week with talking about the rapture and so. So I want to talk about his. I meant to talk about his military genius. I'm talking about his business genius now. So in Daniel chapter 8, verse 24, it says, "And his power shall be mighty." Now, this guy is going to be very powerful, and you can't touch what he does and what he's about to do. "But not by his own power. He shall destroy wonderfully. I told you that. How many people, you see a mess after a war, this guy will do it wonderfully. That's just the narrative they use. He's brilliant at destroying things. So he'll destroy one, and he will prosper and practice and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. He shall magnify himself in his own heart, and by peace shall destroy many, and shall also stand up against the prince of princes, and shall be broken without hand. The Bible says here that he will, and by peace shall he destroy many. That's just a skill set that you just really got to be brilliant at. He's going to destroy people with peace. He's going to make covenants with the children of Israel and Palestine, and everybody's going to think that it's all heading toward utopia. No, this guy's into destroy, and he does it wonderfully, and he does it through peace. So in verse 25 it says, and through his policy, it says also, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. Stocks and shares and crafts and enterprise and business. This guy's policies will cause craft to excel. Businesses will do great. New ideas will come up. He'll come up with new ideas. He'll build factories and share his ideas, globally with different ones who take it on, or partners that will jump into with him entrepreneurially. And this guy's business will cause craft to prosper. So this guy is going to be a business genius. He's going to come up with ideas and share them, and people are just going to jump on them because of his brilliance. And again, his policy. So he'll be a policy maker. He will have influence on craft. He will have influence on stocks. Right now, if you go up and look at stocks and shares, they'll talk about certain, individuals that sort of run the stock exchange in Wall Street, or people like the Elon Musks or Bill Gates or people like that influence it because of their policies. We're going to build here, we're going to start making this, we're moving our factory to somewhere else, and the stocks go down. And there are people who influence that market. This guy will influence it all. He will influence Wall Street. He will influence the movers and shakers in London. He will influence them in Beijing or anywhere else that there's the stock shares business and enterprise. This guy will have policies that will influence them all. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, he will cause craft, enterprise to prosper. That's who the guy is. In verse 38 it says, and in his stead he shall honor the God of forces. This is basically it's a God that his people never worshipped. It's an other God, but it's a God of fortress, or a God of defense, really is what it is. And a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. The guy's loaded. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, who he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. So as he acknowledges it, he advances, he grows, he extends his influence. And he shall cause them that rule over many, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land with for gain, or great gain. What it says here is that this particular guy is going to worship somewhere else. He's going to look more to his own strength and his own abilities more so than the God of their fathers, and worship what his fathers would never have worshipped or never would have done. And as a result, he's going to prosper and he's going to excel. And those that follow him, he will give them property or land. And he'll just delve out, have an island in the Caribbean. Hey, you know what? You'd look lovely in it, and he's just handing out bribes. He's giving land and increase to all who follow him, or all that lean to him. It says here in verse 42 as it goes on, and he will extend his power over many countries. Again, a very powerfully influential, governmental, military, intellectual, oratory genius. He shall extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape. He will gain control of the treasures of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt and the Libyans and the Cushites in submission. Cush is all up around Greece and all of that area. Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran. This guy's going to have tremendous, in the Middle East, this guy's going to have tremendous influence. But again, he'll gain control. He didn't say he'll just gain influence. Earlier on, he was influencing the whole thing with his policy. Now he's in control. He's in control of the stock exchanges. He's in control of treasuries. He's in control of the value of the dollar. Whatever he does affects currencies. So the guy is in control. Not just influence, he's in control now of currencies. Yes.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Switch chat. Would you go back one page?
Uh-huh.
What does explain the strange God? I mean, he is the son of Satan.
Yes.
So he's not worshiping. Is that?
No, he's not. What basically he's leaning to is his own ability. It's actually, when in the Hebrew it says the God of fortresses. And basically what it's saying is his ability that nobody can touch him. He's worshiping this idea that I'm untouchable. You can't touch me. I'm indestructible. I'm smarter than you are. I'm richer than you are. I've got more insight with people and more influence with people than you'll ever have. So you come up against me, listen, I worship at a level of I'm indestructible. And nobody else can do this. This guy, so he worships this God of I'm indestructible. It's him. Well, it's the power that's running him. No, he's not telling everybody what it is, but what he's basically saying is, you can't touch me. You can't lay a finger on me. And as he goes on, he prospers. He worships this God, and everything in his life is about money and gold and precious stones and gain and so on and so forth. And whoever acknowledges him and agrees with him, he rewards them for following like. So I'm a friend of his, and you can't touch me because I'm his friend. I know.
It's his form of blessing.
Pardon?
It's his form of blessing.
It's his form of blessing. And that's what he worships. So he thinks he's indestructible. And power, money, and those things do that to people. They think that they're untouchable. And especially in society we live in today, some people that live in that type of class feel that they can do whatever they want. And there's laws for them and there's laws for other people. So you watch sometimes corruption going on or things going on, and you wonder why people get away with it. It's because everybody at that level is bought into it in some make, shape, or form, and so they can't get away from it, and they're just bought in. And so everybody knows it's wrong, and everybody knows there's two sets of laws, but that's what it's saying. He has a set of laws for himself, and he worships that. And anybody who worships with him or agrees with him, he doles out the bribes to them in land and riches and favor. So that's all that means. So he's worshiping his indestructibility. At least he thinks so. So he gets control of the treasuries. He gets control of the silver and the gold. He gets control of this stuff. And as a result of that, he brings influence to bear on the global economy. That's how influential this guy is. Revelation 13:16. And all the forces, it also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Don't ask me the number, all right? And don't ask me to explain it. There are so many different terminologies to what it could be, what it might be. You know, is it a geographical coordinates of something, and so on and so forth. There's a million different, we don't know. We just do know this, that in his economy, under his influence, running stocks and shares and countries and corporations and business and craft and enterprise, that if you want to barter or live in his community or under his influence, you're going to have to submit to his regime. And that regime means to carry or bear some type of mark that identifies you as submitted to him. That's all. What it is, I don't know. It tells you where it's placed. Could it be a chip? Could it be a tattoo? It could be anything. I won't be here for it, and I won't be getting it either. So, but you know, you can speculate all you want, and it is only speculative. Because it doesn't define what it is, you can come up with anything, and you really can't disagree with it because we don't know. But here's the deal: if you are in under his influence, you cannot buy or sell. So you can't go to Publix. You just can't. You can't go to Costco. You just can't go and have a meal. You just can't extract finance. He's in charge of. He rules it. His policies influence the whole thing. Now, there'll be countries that won't have that. There'll be countries you can go to the shop. There'll be countries where will not take his mark, will not allow his influence to bear. And he will go after them in order to defeat them and take them under his control. But there will be countries that will not submit to this guy. So, God forbid anybody that's left sit there and submit to it. I hope they get YouTube and find out what we're talking about and pack their bags and move somewhere where he doesn't have an influence, where people are resisting this individual. But he's a very powerful guy, as you can see. So you can't, Bart, yes sir.
So our hope, we know, is we will be raptured out and we won't be around for this.
Correct.
So this is 50 years or 100 years or 200 years from now.
No,
But
could be next year.
do you believe, or next year, but do you believe the things that are going on right now are stepping stones? Because this won't just like turn on a switch one day. I mean, there will be a transition to Bitcoin, a transition to some other form, and then people are forced to do it kind of the way they're trying to force people to do things right now. Do you believe it's not these are stepping stones
Yes.
to that?
It's so obvious what's going on that globalism is this effort. God stopped globalism back at the Tower of Babel, back in Genesis chapter 11, under Nimrod. How many of you remember that story? Under Nimrod, Nimrod defied God, the Bible said. He was a leader. The thing about it was he was a bad leader. And Nimrod rose up, he defied God, or he thumbed his nose at God is a better way of describing it in modern terms. He said, who do you think you are? And he decided to build a tower to the heavens, and exalt his name and the name of the people and get a name for themselves. God came down to look at it and thought, nah, it's not a good idea. And in fact, I made you guys, so I know that if you get it in your heart to do something, or your imagination can conjure it up, you can do it. So I got to stop it. That's how powerful man is. God had to stop that because he knew that they would do it. And then God gave them languages to confuse them so that they couldn't communicate with each other. And he dispersed them across the earth. That's where languages come in. And the whole intent was God is for, in this current climate, nationalism in the right sense as opposed to globalism. And let me explain that. When you have nationalism, you have nations that are communities that put themselves under certain laws or governances that they agree on, morals and values and standards and economies. If you happen to find yourself in a country, in a nation, where the leader is dictatorial and wicked, then you can cross a border into another country that doesn't have such leadership. And you can go from one nation to another by escaping from one to the other. When you have globalism, you can't go anywhere. It wouldn't matter what country you go to because they all work together under a group of leaders or a leadership or a leader. And so God was against globalism back in the days of Nimrod because Nimrod was evil. So you get an evil globalist leader and then the whole world becomes under his dictatorial evil and cruelty. And you don't want somebody like that. So in the current climate under sin consciousness, God would rather have nations. That's why he chose the nation of Israel, brought the nation of Israel forth by faith through covenant to raise them up among nations and show them that there is one God and they can leave wherever and proselyte and come to and yield to the God of Israel and receive the same blessing that they were under. Leave their country, come to theirs, so to speak. The millennial kingdom is globalism. It's when Jesus will come and set up his kingdom and he will rule the earth. because it'll be a different leader and a different regime. But until then, God's against globalism. Globalism is man's idea of getting control of the whole planet. The thing about it is you put the wrong man or the wrong group of people in charge and everybody on the planet suffers. You can go nowhere. So right now with the United Nations and so on and so forth, they're tying the world together. Economies are coming together. All this stuff is all being tied together. So it wouldn't matter where you go. It's like, in Iran right now, they can shut down your bank account, they can cripple your economy because they won't give you access to the banking system. Well, who won't? Well, the central banks won't. Or the BIC and all of these different groups, globalist groups that are trying to run the world. So you go to the G5 or the G7, or you go to the whatever you call them. Yeah, all of these. Well, that's where all the policies are made for the globe. They were the ones that talked about the Great Reset a couple of years ago. They've got plans for the whole planet. If you go to Davos, they're all the movers and shakers. They're the BIC, they're the central banks, and then there's the World Health Organization and United Nations, and all of these different organizations all filter down through these policies that come down from that hierarchy. It's globalism. Why did I get into this? That's all right, Donald. No. I'm just wondering why I did it. I mean, I hope it helps everybody understand. But he is going to try. He will not rule the world, but he will try to do it. The only person who's ever going to rule the world is Jesus Christ. Period.
Son, is the reason you say that he won't rule the world because of what Daniel laid out? Is that correct, or is there other scripture that leads us to believe that?
There's other scriptures where Jesus, the Bible says in Matthew 25, comes down at the Battle of Armageddon, and then he judges the nations, and he puts the goats on one side and the sheep on the other side, and the sheep go into the millennial kingdom. And I'll deal all with this in the next few weeks as we talk about the millennial kingdom. But there will be a judgment of nations. Some will go into the millennial kingdom and others will go into judgment. Yes, sir.
Is there anything that indicates, Daniel basically in his prophecy talked about the areas that would be included under the Antichrist, but what is there to indicate which ones will not be under his domain?
It doesn't.
It doesn't?
No, it doesn't tell us which ones aren't. The smart thing to do is be aware there'll be 144,000 regenerated Jews that will be going around the world at that time proclaiming and declaring the truth. People would do well to listen to them. And then there'll be 2 witnesses as well. And they will be doing signs and wonders. So that'll be on CNN and ABC and Fox and all that sort of stuff. So the world will get plenty of witness. There'll be a lot of proclamations going on. But this guy is going to defy everything. And he'll be hard to dispute because he'll do lying signs and wonders and a whole bunch of other things that will delude a whole bunch of people. He's brilliant. He's the best. Yes.
Oh yeah, I was also going to ask about the countries, and so with the World Health Organization and globalism, what we just are living through is that.
Yes.
Just with Corona, it's all the countries. So are you saying at some point when the Antichrist appears, some will break away and say this, you know what I mean? Because right now it seems like they've all fallen in line and everyone's following World Health and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. So when he comes, some will break away and not buy into.
For example, you had a president, the last president of this country went to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and basically said, if you don't pay up, we're out.
Right.
Okay, well, we pay up. Well, if you had said you weren't paying up, we were out anyway. We're not going to follow this thing. We're not going to protect and not have everybody. So he was branded, rebellious against the system and so on and so forth. Because it's slowly just locking itself in. It's becoming interdependent. So you have the euro dollar, the petrodollar, and you have all sorts of stuff, all linking everything together. So, this economy, suffering right now at the gas pump, and so they go to the Arabians and asked them to pump more gas and so on and so forth. I mean, all economies are all locking in. So yes, you're watching strategically a lot of evil men too, influential evil men, families and so on and so forth. You hear of it all the time. People talk about, so it's a conspiracy theory. There are several families that run the banks in the world. That's as simple as that. And they do, and everybody knows that they do. And you get a wicked family with that much power, and you start to control issues. You start to control governments. You go into a government or a nation in Africa, and you buy or contribute to their mining contribution, or you contribute to their infrastructure or their roads, and you lend them money. Well, if you lend money to somebody, they automatically become your slave because they're paying you back. And so the borrower is subject to the lender. So there are great countries buying over economies like China and different ones are buying countries by lending to them. America does the same. Don't kid yourself. There's a lot of this stuff going on. People know how to own a country. So yes, this is all going on. We Christians just need to be aware of it, savvy of it, but we need to get on with the business of the kingdom and stop worrying about, who's getting the mark, or is this the mark, or is that this, or is this that. Stop worrying, stop being afraid. Let's get on with our business and keep our eyes focused on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Not what's going on, but be aware of what's going on. That's all. Yes?
The separation of the sheep and the goats takes place after the tribulation, before the tribulation?
After the tribulation. Comes after the Battle of Armageddon.
So I always thought that was individuals. That will be nations.
Yep. And we'll deal with it in a few weeks' time when we go in and do that series on the Millennial Kingdom. But if you just want to read yourself Matthew 25 and
I've been reading it, trying to understand it.
Did you see the word nations written in there?
So what?
Did you see the word nations written on it?
I did.
Well, that's what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So. Okay, so this guy's running all of this. It says in Ezekiel 28 verse 4, it says, this was speaking of the Prince of Tyre. Remember we took up the relationship between the king of Tyre, which when we read the narrative is actually Satan in the Garden of Eden, who was made up of all these precious stones and jewels and trafficked and merchandised and got wicked and evil, and God threw him out because he thought he was next thing to God. It says this is his son. This is the relationship. This is the Prince of Tyre. So it says here, and your wisdom and understanding by your wisdom and understanding you have gained wealth for yourself and amassed gold and silver in your treasuries. By your great skill in trading you have increased your wealth, and because of your wealth your heart has grown proud. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says, because you think you are wise, or you are as wise as God, and he goes on to say, I will destroy you. But again, I want you to see, it's by your great skill in trading you have increased your wealth. This guy is a business genius. Business genius. The guy just knows how to make things work. And again, he'll become very wealthy and end up controlling through policy the finances of many a global organization. It says here in Ezekiel 28:15, speaking of him and the Antichrist and Satan, it says, you were blameless in your ways from the day that you were created till wickedness was found in you. He's talking about Satan here. Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence. So he says the same of Satan. When Satan ran his world order here at one stage, long before man ever showed up, that's exactly what his downfall was, his brilliance. And he got prideful and then thought, I'm as good as, better than God. I will exalt my throne. And God said, now pal, it's above your pay grade. You can't do that. So, again, like father, like son, so to speak. That's all I'm saying. That's where he gets it from. This guy, the Prince of Tyre, gets it from Satan, who did the exact same thing. Done the same, his trade, his widespread trade has made him very wealthy. It says in Ezekiel 28:16, your rich commerce led you to violence, it goes on to say, and you sinned. This is just another version of it. So I banished you in disgrace from the mountain of God. But again, your rich commerce led you to violence. He wanted more of it. It's just amazing, you know. You get so much money and you've more than enough to live on. In fact, you've more than what more people have to live on. In fact, if you just were to go by a weekly salary or a monthly salary or an annual salary, you know, some people have enough money that you really couldn't spend it. You could just buy the things you want and the nice things that you need to have, and you could live comfortably for the rest of your life on what you have. But they never stop there. They want more. They want to make sure that they have more and more. And then all of a sudden you're driven, and when is enough enough? But because of money and what it does, there's a tendency to think you need more of it. And there's a pursuit for it and after it, and that's what happens here. That's why the Bible says it's the love of money is the... Yeah, Timothy, he writes to Timothy, it's the love of the stuff. There's something about it that has power and resource and influence, and you just can't get enough of it. Especially when you're created as a creature to rule and reign, it perverts that inbuilt hard wiring to the point of violence and whatever. It says here in Psalm 24, and please remember this. In Psalm 24 it says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. As much and all as this guy is going to try and run the world, he doesn't own it. It's not his. And so he's never ever going to get to the place where he thinks he runs the whole thing. God has. It always belonged to God, always will. So don't ever be afraid, you know, he's going to get so powerful. He's not. He never will. Please always remember, God still runs the show. He really does behind the scenes. And the same in our lives. Don't ever be afraid of this or that or this is happening. God's well able to take care of us. He just truly is. Don't ever be afraid of what's going on. Keep your eyes on Jesus. That's the thing. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Stop looking at Washington and London and stop. Just keep your eyes on Jesus. That's what keeps us able to do what we do. It says here in Psalm 15, verse 10, For all the animals of the forest are mine, and I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird on the mountain, and all the animals of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I wouldn't tell you, for the world is mine and everything in it. In other words, if I needed something or wanted something, I wouldn't be asking you guys. I mean, come on. I know everything. I know where everything is. You don't. So you're not going to be doing me any favor. You're not going to build me anything that I need to live in. I give you the whole thing. Basically what he's saying is, look at guys, as much and all as you run things and you think you're smart and you think you're able to do stuff for me, please understand, I'm God. And there's really nothing you can do for me except honor me by serving or yielding to my plan and purpose and putting me front and center in your life. It's what I can do for you, not what you can do for me. And again, please understand that this guy is influential, intelligent, his strategies, his policies, his economy, his wisdoms, and all of that stuff. Let me tell you, at the end of the day, God's still in charge. God still owns it all. He owns everything. This guy can't tell you all the birds of the field or the mountains and whatever. He can't tell you. He has no clue. He's smart. He's not that smart. He's intelligent, but he's not that wise. So please remember that. As smart and all as this guy will be, intelligent and entrepreneur, he's still not God. So don't ever be afraid of him. It says here in Haggai 2 in verse 8, and God says this, the silver is mine and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget that. God owns all of it. He owns the whole thing. Man is a steward of it right now. We're going through all of this stuff to find out who wants to serve God, who will serve God, who will believe, who will yield, and you've got all of this other stuff going on from a very influential fallen cherub and all his cohorts that are trying to get men to turn away from God. But that's all that's going on. That really is the big picture. Everything you see, all the little skirmishes down here in the physical world are just the outworking of that great spiritual battle that's going on. So don't lose sight of what's going on by the little skirmishes that are going on down here. That's all. God still owns it all. Colossians 1:16 says this, for by him were all things created. This is Jesus. All things were created that are in heaven, that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him, and they were all created for him. Don't ever forget that. I know there may be somebody right now thinks, well, this is mine. It's not. Well, I own it. You don't. This is my island. It's not. It all belongs to him. It always did. You're just a leaseholder. You're just a resource user of the things God has given us to exercise our creativity and our God-like DNA. That's all. To see how we do, see how we fare out. It says here in Revelation 4, it says, Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you have created all things, and for your pleasure they were created. Again, please just don't forget it. God's in charge, ultimately. So the little skirmishes, the economies, the rise and fall of different governments and people and wicked people and all sorts of stuff, don't be afraid of any of it. None of it. Alien invasions, don't be afraid of nothing. It's just keep your eyes on Jesus, for goodness sake. Even if they do show up, keep your eyes on Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Just, you got to keep focused at all times. His military genius. Let me move into this. Daniel 8:23. And in the latter time of his kingdom, when the transgressions are come to a full, the king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences, it says, shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy. I knew it was coming, excuse me. And he shall destroy wonderfully. And as I said, his military, the guy is just, he knows how to wipe you out. It's as simple as that. Rise up against him, and he'll endeavor to destroy you. And if he does do that, he will. And he'll do it amazingly. It says here in Isaiah 14 and verse 15, speaking of Satan, and again, this is what he done. This is his offspring, this Antichrist, gets his power from this individual. And it just says here, you have he brought, this is when he says, I will exalt my throne above the clouds, I will be like the Most High God. And God says, no, you won't. And he threw him out of heaven. And it says, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee, or squint when they see. What? He says, and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble and did shake kingdoms? Hey, you had so much power. Everybody was afraid of you. Now look at you. You're a wimp when it comes to God. You're just a big wimp. The narrative that was spun down here is that you're awesome and great and you're powerful and resourceful and intelligent, and you're a wimp. It's all a show. And that's what Isaiah says here of Satan, of Lucifer at that time. It was all a show. He braggadocious, says big things against God. He's going to end up in a blubbering heap when Jesus shows up. Militarily, he thinks he can't be touched. He's worshiping the God of forces. He thinks, I'm indestructible. Who can war against me, is his terminology. That's what he says. It says here in Revelation 6:1, and I saw the Lamb open one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, a noise of thunder, and one of the four beasts saying, come and see. These are the four living creatures that are around the throne of God. It said, come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and him that sat on him had a bow, and had a crown, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. This is the Antichrist. And again, in the book of Revelation, when he is released, he's allowed to go do what he's got to do, because it's the outworking of the systems. It's the cumulation of everything and of all evil. He says, he gives him a bow and he gives him a crown, and he says, you're a leader, go ahead. Off you go, conquer. And that's what he goes off to do. Down in verse 6 it says, and there went out a horse that was red and had power, and there was given unto him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given him a great sword. And this is the 3.5 years into the tribulation, when all hell breaks loose, when he goes into the temple and says, I am God, and then that's it. Everybody realizes who he is. Others will fall for it, others won't, and that's when he will be sort of a global attempt for him to take over everything. And that's where you'll see. And after that comes famine, and after that comes death, as far as horses are concerned. In Revelation 13, It says here, and I stood upon the sand of the seas, and I saw the beast rise out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the names of blasphemy. And we read all of this coming through, but watch what it says down here in verse 3. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to the death, and his deadly wound was healed. What does that sound like?
Died and resurrected.
Died and resurrected. Who done that before? Exactly. This guy's just trying to, by the same methodology, win people to him. He said, but his deadly wound, he was assassinated or something. Somebody shot the guy or killed the guy, and it looked like, he's gone. This genius, this intellect, this business influencer, this policy maker, somebody killed him. It's all over the news. Everybody's mourning, and then all of a sudden, he's back. Oh, we're so glad you're back. We've missed you. I mean, tell us what to do. I mean, you were dead, and now you're... This just a big delusion. It says here, he was wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which give power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Question, who is able to make war with him? You get on his side, you're safe. Now you're not. Because there's somebody going to come and make war with him, and it ain't going to last but a few moments. But everyone else down here with ordinary technologies, now you're going to have a battle on your hands. But when Jesus comes back, in Revelation 19, the Bible says, a sword that proceeds out of his mouth, the word of God, he'll annihilate the whole lot of them with his words. That'll be the end of it. He'll fry them crisp and dry, the whole lot of them. And in Megiddo, in that valley that is west or east of Jerusalem, he will totally destroy them. So they're all running around saying, who can make war? Who can make war? Who can make war? Jesus says, hold on a minute, I'm coming. And when he does, it's over. Jesus can make war against them and will destroy him. His lobbying genius, let me just deal with that real quickly. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 44, it says, then the 10 horns out of the kingdom are the 10 kings that shall arise, and after that shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings, and he shall speak great words against the Most High. He will wear out, and again with words, the saints of the Most High. You can't argue with the guy. And think to change times and laws. This is lobbying. This guy is going to endeavor to change calendars, stop days, start new days. Hey, let's stop all of this, worship of, our veterans. Let's get rid of Veterans Day. Let's get rid of Christmas Day, for example. We just call that holiday, happy holiday. Or let's get rid of, Martin Luther King Day. We're fed up. Let's not do that anymore because it causes too much turmoil. And so you have all these lobbyists with different intents lobbying governments to try and change times and policies or remembrances. You have a generation right now that is so woke that they're trying to tear down all of the things that give us an identity as to where we are and where we came from and how we got here. Tough and all as it was, hard and all as it was, wrong and all as it may have been. But we learn from it. We learn not to go do it again. But no, let's tear everything down. Let's get rid of everything. Let's get rid of all our memories. Let's get rid of all, in fact, let's change our history. I think that's what we need to do. If we could change the history, we could change the whole narrative, actually, of what we need to do. So now we're lobbying to change things to suit because we're trying to set up what we want to be set up. Are you all with me? It's happening there.
He needs to hurry because I think it's already started.
But you understand. So why would people think it a strange thing? Say, he never, how can he lobby? Oh, he is. He's in the middle of, people didn't even realize what was going on in the Holocaust because they all thought, but that's a whole other narrative. That was all, a lot of that was to do with money, but that's a whole other issue. I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, there's just so much going on that even the church are just ignorant of. We see one thing play out and we think that's what that's all about. It's not what it's all about. It's all about control over here from another group that are influencing systems, and they're all trying to cumulate in this strategy here. This is men under the influence of sin, and wicked people who get their influence and their promotion from a god of a system that is trying to bring it around to introduce this individual to take over the whole thing. That's all it is. That's all that's going on. And he's not smart enough to have read the book and understand that he loses. He will in chapter 12 of Revelation, when he gets cast down out of the heavens onto the planet. Then he's going to realize his time is short, and that's when he's going to go buck mad. But he hasn't the penny hasn't dropped just yet. So anyway, this guy's a lobbying genius. So you see a lot of wicked lobbying going on in the world today. You see a lot of governments that would sell out their citizenry, sell out their whole citizenry. People that are voted in governments, I watch it in Africa, I watch it in different countries, where people rise up to say, we're going to defend our people, we want to be free from. And then they get free from and they get their independence and they vote in the government, and the first thing you know is in comes this coercion of power and money and vice. And before you know it, the very government that fought to get in to bring freedom is actually now controlling the people, and would sell out a whole generation, a whole citizenry, because of lobbyists that got into the office and said, here, listen, that's for you, that's for us, and we'll trickle a little bit down to the people, build a few factories, and they'll all be happy. What went on there? Just lobbying. Before anybody ever downstream got anything of it, others were in lobbying for what they wanted to be done. This guy's brilliant at it. And he will seek to change times and laws and days and feasts and histories. This guy is brilliant at doing that. He'll convince people. He will try to change stuff that we all deem important and that culture deems necessary. He'll endeavor to change them. Everybody with me? Okay. Governmental genius. It says in Revelation 13, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea. The sea always, in the Word of God, depicts the nations of the world, the seas. When you talk about the Pope, he pontificates. Anybody remember what it is? The seas. He pontificates the nations. That's what they call them. The seas represent the nations of the world. And this is where he comes out of. So he's going to come up, rise up among the nations of the world. It says here in Revelation 17, it says, and God had put in their hearts, this is the nations around him, the ones he's influencing and deluding. It says, and God had put in their hearts to fulfill his will, or to let it happen, and to agree to give their kingdoms unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which I saw, the great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. This is religion, by the way. And so this is Babylon, the whore, and in Revelation 17 and chapter 18, it discusses her rise and her demise. But he gets into bed with religion, is what he does. And religion is very powerful. It's a very powerful thing in the world. And so she prostitutes herself out to him, and he takes advantage of it, and he, so to speak, gets into bed with the harlot, and there are many nations would give themselves over just easily. It's just in their heart to yield to him. They want to be like him. And religion will be the common denominator there that will bring them all in. So they'll just give their nations over to him. They'll just say yes.
I'm sorry, I don't understand 17 at all.
I'm not.
And give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled.
All right, well, you won't understand it because if you haven't read chapter 17 and understand chapter 17, and it's out of context. I'm only pulling the scriptures to show you. But no, you don't understand it because maybe it hasn't just been explained, a whole lot of it to you yet, what Babylon is and who she is and what she does. But all I'm saying, that's why I'm trying to narrate into the circumstance by saying this is religion. It's world religion. It's global religion. And she's called the harlot. She's called Babylon the Great. And she's a prostitute. And she prostitutes herself to whatever government will allow her to, whoever will take her in and, so to speak, get into bed with her. And she will prostitute her influence to the people in the world, because everybody, has a spiritual side to them, so all will burn candles and ring bells. But when they do, she'll be pointing everybody to this individual, and so much so and so influential that these 7 kings, there's a whole bunch of kingdoms that are religiously motivated, and they will give themselves over to the beast because of her religious influence. Let me give you an example. I found this on the web. Great. Let me give you an example, and that is this. What was the example I was going to give you? She put me off.
What is she found?
I'm just trying to think what I was saying there, because it was something I was just... Say again?
How religion...
Yes. There are 2 main religions in the world today. Religions. What are they? Say what?
Catholicism, or Christianity,
and Muslim. They're the 2 largest blocks of religion in the world. They totally oppose one another. And they both believe they both came from Abraham, which they did, but then they diverge. And they're totally opposed to each other. Christian religion is waiting for, and the Muslim religion are waiting for a prophet. So if you read this character, you'll find out that he rises up, but he's also got a sidekick. Who's his sidekick? A false prophet. This guy has a false prophet running around with him, doing lying signs and wonders. And who do you think will be duped by this Antichrist? Christian religions. Who do you think will be duped by the false prophet? The Muslims. And so all world religion will jump into bed with this character. He has influence. And he has influence. Religion has great influence. So this whore that he gets into bed with, so to speak, she's very powerful. She's called world religion. And as a result of this union between him and religion, many of the kingdoms of this world will just yield because their spiritual leaders say, this is him. This is the prophet. This is the Christ. And as a result of that, they'll gladly just yield their kingdoms to him and say, well, if he's the Antichrist or if he's the Christ, and the Pope says he's the Christ, then what are we arguing with? I mean, let's submit everything and all we are to him. Or if he's the prophet and the prophet says this, then do what the prophet says. So there'll be kingdoms, won't have to be fought after. He won't have to go to war with them to win them. Religion will just suck them all in. They'll just all come in. They'll just come in. And the fact that he's going to do lying signs and wonders and look like he was killed and rose again, they're just going to fall for this delusion. That's what it means. And chapter 17 and 18 deals with not just her rise, but in 18, her demise.
What threw me off was what God had put it in.
Yeah, and it's just, he doesn't cause it, but he allows it to happen. He realizes it's going to happen, and it's going to seemingly give him a black eye, because it's going to say God said and God's doing, and this is what God says, and we prophesy, and God's Spirit told us to tell you, and God's going to come up a lot in this whole thing, but God allows it. God says, okay, all right, I'm going to allow this to happen. Go ahead, use my name, say I said it, do whatever, run your system. And it's like, God, why didn't you say something? God said, well, I will at the end of all this. When I crack the heavens open and everything goes dark and you see the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords standing there, I'll say everything I need to say at that moment. But until then, let's let this thing roll. And that's what it really means. He allows this to happen, but they're going to be using his name all the time. This harlot and this Babylon the Great is going to use his name constantly to say God said, God said, God said, prophesy, God's doing, God wants, and he's going to allow that to happen. He's just going to say, I'm going to stand back here and not going to say a word until I need to. Does that make sense? Everybody okay?
Isn't it like a huge, I don't want to use the word, he's not testing, but that line between who is really with him and following him, or following the influence of the world?
Yeah, faith is always going to be required. At some stage you're going to have to choose you this day whom you'll serve. And that's why we've got to keep focused, because there's a lot of distractions going on, and we've got to keep our eyes where they should be.
Hassan, this would be really attractive to the Jewish, right? Because this would be the first coming that they didn't think happened.
When I get to his religious genius, if I ever get to it this morning, that's his brilliance. That is his brilliance, because the ones who are looking for Christ will say he is the Christ. And that's it. I mean, if they turn around and say it, and they're the ones waiting for him, then everybody's going to say, obviously, this is the guy.
And it's all the military and everything that they were expecting the first time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, yeah, this guy, he said, I'll show it to you in a minute. We'll get to it in a minute. Isaiah 9 and 6 says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And the government, this governmental genius that this other guy thinks he has, when all the kingdoms yield to him and religion gets them all to buy into him, listen, it says here, the government, speaking of Jesus, shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end. So this other guy looks like everybody's yielding to, all coming in to the fold, to the flock. Kingdoms yielding because of religion, kingdoms yielding because of his oppression or warring against him and losing, or kingdoms that he went in and won peaceably and then destroyed them wonderfully. Looks like he's taken over everything. Jesus will run everything. He won't. He wants to, only Jesus will. It goes on here in Revelation 11:15, and the seventh angel sounded. There was a great voice in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world. Remember Satan offered that to him back in Matthew chapter 4 and Luke 4. He says, hey, I'll give you all this. He goes, nah, I'll leave it. I'll come and collect it all later on. You hang on to it for another wee while, but when I come back, I'll take the whole lot. You don't have to give it to me. I'll just take it from you. So he says here, bow down and worship me. He said, no. He says, there's going to be a moment when Jesus comes back, and the kingdoms of this world will become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. Or down in verse 17, saying, we give thanks, O Lord God Almighty, for thou art and wast and art to come, because thou hast taken to thee thy great power and hast reigned. Jesus is going to do it. People today call Jesus King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and I understand where you get that from. At this moment in time, he's not the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That's a title that he would get at that moment at the Battle of Armageddon, when he subdues all kingdoms and all kings under him. At this moment, he's got another office, and that's when the church gets all confused. Is prophet, priest, and king. He is our great high priest right now at this moment in time. That is his office at the moment, and that is what he's doing at the moment. But King of Kings and Lord of Lords is for a later time, and that's the Battle of Armageddon when he does that. The religious genius, as we talked about. In John 5:43, he says, I am come in my Father's name. Jesus said that. I come down. My Father has sent me down. I am the Christ. I am God's Messiah. He says, I am come in my Father's name, and you receive me not. If another come in his own name, you will receive. He's talking to the Pharisees and Sadducees here. He's talking to the religious leaders. And he says, you know what, guys? The God that you say you serve sent me. I am his Christ. And you will not believe me, even though I've done signs and wonders and all of this stuff for you. He said, there's another guy coming after me, because you're going to reject me, and you don't realize you're going to crucify me. But there's another guy coming. He's going to come in his own name. And do you know what? You will receive him. This is this guy's religious genius. He's going to convince the Jews that he's the Christ. No. Jesus says the minute he steps into the Holy of Holies and says, I'm God, you get out of there quick. You run out of Jerusalem, get out of that place as quick as you can. Head for the mountains of Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Why? God will protect you in those mountains. You just stay up there. He can't come up to you, and you can't come down to him. Well, you can, but don't. But we covered all that some time ago. Anyway, so that is the greatest religious delusion, to convince the people who are looking for Christ that the person standing in front of them is Christ, and they'll be suckered into it. And here's why. It says, then he, this is the Antichrist, shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. This is with the Jews. Remember that? He's going to confirm a covenant for a 7-year period. And says, and in the middle of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abomination he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation that the determined shall be poured upon the desolate. The he is the Antichrist. He's going to confirm a covenant with the children of Israel. This is a prophecy concerning the children of Israel, where God gives them a timeline, 70 weeks, from the decree of the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem to the return of the Christ, walking down the streets of Jerusalem. And he says, but in that last week, that last 7-year period, he will confirm a covenant with many of the Jews for 1 week. 7 years. But in the middle of that week, he's going to walk into the Holy of Holies, the new temple that's erected on the Temple Mount, and he's going to walk in, and in front of the world press, he's going to say, oh, by the way, I'm God. And then all hell breaks loose. So this is his religious genius. He's able to do this. He's able to convince. In fact, that's why they call him the lie. Not a lie, the lie. He is... If you didn't know better, you would think it's him. That's how brilliant this guy is. That's how much of a delusion he is. It says, who opposeth and exalted himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, proclaiming or declaring himself to be God. That has to be the biggest religious delusion, or the greatest religious genius. For somebody to be able to get to that place in the world where he can sit and actually people will believe that he's God. That's how religiously powerful. And the harlot that we mentioned earlier on in chapter 17 and 18 is going to embrace him. Religion is going to embrace him. And religion is going to cause many nations to just yield to him. Just give their hearts to him. Because they'll say he is God. We always knew, and the Jews are running for the mountains of Edom, Ammon, and Moab, and there's a helter-skelter of nations in the world saying, that's not true, I'm not following that, so-and-so, and they'll reject it. He'll start to make war with nations who reject. Others will say, we knew it, others are bribed, policies have changed, but the religious people are the ones that are going to put the biggest stamp on this, and they're going to try and say, he is the Christ. The other one's going to say, he is the prophet. And that's it. They're going to all jump into bed together with him, and he's going to take control. Religion's going to take him where he wants to go for the next 3.5 years. And this guy is just going to... And, you know, the thing about it is we're living at a time right now where you and I could actually see that happen. Technologically, socially, economically, governmentally, politically, scientifically. We can see that. I can see it in my mind's eye. I think that's all possible. In fact, I think that's all possible to happen in my lifetime. The media are there. We saw what media can do when they control a narrative, how they can change a global system. They can shut down a global system. They can spread fear throughout a global system. How quickly would fear go now that we've rehearsed it? How quickly would it take to shut it down again if the next one wasn't sort of a virus that you can see, but the outworking of a facial blistering or foaming at the mouth or something that you do see? How quickly would that shut the place down? How quickly would that separate individuals or isolate people from other people, and communities from communities, or families from families, or religious from non-religious? How quickly could the world truly be put in an upheaval? It wouldn't take but a couple of announcements. We have a new one What is it? Oh, you thought the last one was bad. This is worse. And if you get this, we don't have... You can see it. Lock the door. Lock the doors, quick. Lock the doors. Fear. Don't kid yourself. We are living in a time. And you got to follow the science, because we know better than you do. Yeah.
Since this is after the church is raptured,
Mm-hmm.
so I understand the Jews falling easily, I understand the Muslims, but what are these Christians that are these the lukewarm Christians that didn't make it to the rapture? Like,
No, no.
what are these?
There is no lukewarm Christian that's going to be left. Everybody's extreme.
The harlot, the people that, the Christian side that is left.
No, there's a lot of... When we say Christian, Christianity is a religion. If you're on a men's group, which you're not, but if you're at a men's group on a Tuesday, you'll hear me saying a million times, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian. I'm a citizen of a country. I'm a citizen of a kingdom. And that's what's wrong with us. When you say Christian, you automatically denominate yourself among those who profess Christ as God. So the Jehovah's Witnesses will call him a God. Mormons will call him a God. But they don't tell you that he's the brother of Satan as well. I mean, you don't go into all of that detail, but they all claim to be Christian. So if you go to the Mormon church, they'll tell you they believe that Jesus is Christ and that he died and rose again. And they'll have a similar type of confession or profession, and so will all these other Christian denominative religions. We're not Christians. Christian actually, when it was used in the book of Acts in the city of Ephesus, it was a derogative thing. So them Christ people. It wasn't a positive thing, it was a negative thing. It was a derogative statement of a bunch of people. We're not Christians, we are citizens. That's a constitutional document. We live by laws, the principles, and everything we do is operated by the principles of that. Be doers of that, and we prosper in everything that we do. And it's what's wrong with the church. So, but in the rapture, and we'll talk about it next week, everybody goes, strong and weak. We're all out of here. And there's a reason for it. And the reason this guy can't come to the fore is because we're still here. That's the reason. But we'll deal with that next week. We'll have a look at that, and we will, if I can, I'll try and bring in post, mid, and pre-trib philosophies. Some people believe that, we're going to go through the tribulation. As I've said many a time, I'll tell you where the key is for the front door. Please go in and feed the goldfish and the dogs and whatever, because I won't be here. I'm out on the first exit. But if you want to stay on and go through the Great Tribulation and you think that's what you're doing, hey, in my house you can have it. We have these philosophies. Yes?
It seems such a front to what Christ did for us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Meaningless.
When it talks about the great prostitute sitting on the many waters,
Uh-huh.
is there a definition for where that is?
Yes, it's the nations of the world. It's the nations of the world. The seas. Not all of them. Many waters. Not the seas. Not everything.
Because waters means nations or seas.
Yeah, seas is nations. But the waters here he's talking about is some of those nations. She will govern and rule. And that's what it means. Yeah, no, it's not even the rabbit trail. It's so hard to. That's my problem, and for the want of a better term, when I delve into a subject, I hate just titillating at peripherals. I want you to understand what it means. So it's very hard when people say something and we go down a rabbit trail. I think, what can I say that will explain it without and bring some understanding without having to explain the whole thing? Because my head just goes, I have a load of things I'd love to say about that, but what can I say that would just help answer your question without spending hours? Yeah. You just ask the lady beside you. My wife and my children make a statement all the time. What's the statement, Leslie? don't ask him a question. You know what they say? And they've said it, all my kids, please don't ask him a question. Problem is, I just can't give you an answer. I have to explain it. So it's, yeah. So sometimes people come along, or Lucy, you'll see one of you guys come up and say, can I ask you something? And Lucy goes, oh, okay, all right. He's going to be up there for hours if he was left to it. And unless somebody drags him out.
And she's hungry, you better hurry.
Yeah. So anyway, my kids do the same. And so if they were here, they'd say exactly the same. They say, please don't ask him a question. Because if you ask him a question about anything, if he has an understanding, he's going to try and explain money to you, or he's going to try and explain governments, or he's going to try and explain whatever. When you ask him a question, he's going to try and explain it. And it's my weakness. And it's also what drives me in life. So when I'm constantly reading to gain knowledge of stuff. So I gather a lot of information, and I'm always at it. So sorry.
But just to finish up, the prostitute and harlot, their religion.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
World religion.
Right.
World religion. It's not just our religion, it's world religion. You can see it's happening at the moment, this ecumenical movement that's going on at the moment, where all the religions of the world are gathering together and they're worshipping. I mean, we had a movement there about 3 or 4 years ago where the Vatican hosted, and I think they do now annually, host a gathering of religious leaders together, including, you say, well, the Muslims and the Baha'is and the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses. The American Red Indians are there too, all dressed up in their garb and as priests with all of their, and then you got all the African, they're all there, all in their religious garb, and they're worshipping one God is what they're basically saying. Hey, listen, we're all worshipping the same God. I just dress him up like this. You call him the wind and nature. You call him meditation. You call him, reincarnation. We all have. You call him Mother Earth, and it's in crystals, and you're hugging trees, and you're doing it this way. Hey, you know what? We're just people looking for the same God. That's all. So let's worship him. But you worship him your way. I'll worship him my way. But let's have a session where we worship him together. It's unity. It's unity.
I'd love to see who leads that meeting.
Pardon?
I'd love to see who leads that meeting.
I can't imagine. Again, the ones who have the biggest influence. That's why the Vatican's holding it and host it, because they can and afford to. So that makes sense to everybody? All right, next week we're going to just deal with why this individual can't come forth. There is a reason. We are the reason he is not known at the moment. And I'll deal with that next week. And then after that, we'll go into a series on the millennial kingdom, and we'll talk about all of those issues, what that kingdom's going to look like when Jesus comes to set up his kingdom for 1,000 years.